She didn't know who she was. She didn't know where she belonged. She didn't know why the moon goddess had cursed her with a life of endless pain. But Lila knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was nothing. The heavy wooden bucket slipped from her scarred fingers as the kitchen door burst open, cold mountain air rushing in like a slap. Lord Cresswell's voice boomed through the manor, sharp and commanding. "The Alpha King arrives within the hour. Every surface will gleam. Every meal will be perfect. Every servant will remember their place." Lila's heart hammered against her ribs. The Alpha King, here, at this forgotten border manor where broken wolves came to disappear. She scrambled for the fallen bucket, icy water soaking through her threadbare dress. Around her, the kitchen exploded into frenzied activity. Cook barked orders, while scullery maids scurried like frightened mice. But Lila moved in stunned silence, her mind reeling. Why would the most powerful alpha in the known world come here? To this place where Lord Cresswell collected damaged souls and worked them until they shattered completely. "Lila!" Cook's meaty hand cracked across her cheek. "Stop gaping like a fish and get to work. You'll be serving the high table tonight." The words hit like a physical blow. "No, please, let me work the kitchens. I can't." "You can and you will." Cook's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. "Lord Cresswell specifically requested you serve the king's table, said it was time you learned proper respect for your betters." Lila's blood went cold. She knew exactly what this was. Punishment disguised as honour. Lord Cresswell took perverse pleasure in watching her fail, in demonstrating to his guests how pathetic a wolfless Omega could be. The next hour passed in a blur of preparation. Lila scrubbed until her hands bled, changed into her one decent dress, a plain brown thing that had seen better decades, and tried to steady her shaking hands. She'd survived 6 years in this place by being invisible, by keeping her head down and her mouth shut, by accepting that she was broken, useless, meant for nothing more than washing floors and emptying chamber pots. But tonight she would be seen. Tonight she would stand before the Alpha King himself. The great hall had been transformed. Candles flickered from every surface, casting dancing shadows across ancient stone walls. The high table groaned under the weight of Lord Cresswell's finest silver and crystal. Everything perfect, everything gleaming, everything except her. Lila pressed herself against the wall as the main doors opened with ceremonial grandeur. Lord Cresswell swept forward in his finest robes, a broad smile stretching across his cruel face. "Your Majesty," he boomed, "welcome to Raven's Hollow Manor. We are deeply honoured by your presence." Then he walked in. Lila's breath caught in her throat. The Alpha King was nothing like she had imagined. She had expected someone old, perhaps soft from years of luxury. Instead, she found herself staring at a man who looked like he had been carved from the mountains themselves. He stood well over 6 feet, his broad shoulders filling the doorway with commanding presence. Dark hair touched with silver at the temples framed a face that was all sharp angles and fierce beauty. But it was his eyes that made her knees weak, golden, like liquid amber caught in sunlight, like the heart of a flame. And impossibly, devastatingly, those eyes found hers across the crowded hall. Something in her chest pulled tight. A warmth she had never felt before spread through her body, starting from her core and radiating outward until her fingertips tingled. The sensation was so intense, so foreign, that she gasped aloud. What was happening to her? The Alpha King, Thaddeus, she remembered his name was Thaddeus, held her gaze for a long moment. His expression was unreadable, but something flickered in those golden depths, something that made her feel exposed and vulnerable and strangely, impossibly safe. Then Lord Cresswell's voice cut through the moment like a blade. "Your Majesty, please allow me to escort you to your seat. We have prepared our finest feast in your honour." The spell broke. The king's attention turned to their host, and Lila sagged against the wall, her heart racing. What had just happened? Why had he looked at her like that? Why had her body responded as if it recognized something her mind couldn't understand? She was nothing. A broken, wolfless servant. Alpha Kings didn't notice nothing. The feast began with all the pomp Lord Cresswell could muster. Lila moved through her duties like a ghost, refilling wine goblets and clearing plates with hands that trembled despite her best efforts. She kept her head down, her eyes fixed on the polished floor, but she could feel him watching her. Every time she approached the high table, those golden eyes tracked her movements with an intensity that made her skin burn. She was refilling his wine goblet when disaster struck. Her hand, already unsteady from exhaustion and nerves, shook as she poured. The rich red wine splashed across the pristine white tablecloth and onto the king's ceremonial cloak, a magnificent thing of midnight blue silk embroidered with silver wolves. The hall fell silent. Lila stared in horror at the spreading stain, the wine like blood against the precious fabric. Her heart stopped beating. Her lungs forgot how to draw air. She had just destroyed the Alpha King's formal regalia. She was dead. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words barely audible. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean—" "It's all right." The voice was deep, rich like aged whiskey, and impossibly gentle. Lila's head snapped up in shock to find the king studying her with those devastating golden eyes. "Accidents happen," he continued, his tone warm with something that sounded almost like amusement. "What's your name?" Lila's voice cracked. "Lila, Your Majesty." "Lila." He repeated her name like he was tasting it, rolling it around on his tongue. "A beautiful name." Lord Cresswell surged to his feet, his face purple with rage. "Your Majesty, I deeply apologize for this servant's clumsiness. She will be punished severely for this offence. Guards." "No." The single word rang out with such absolute authority that everyone in the hall froze. The king had not raised his voice, but power rolled off him in waves that made the air itself tremble. "There will be no punishment," he continued, never taking his eyes off Lila's face. "It was an accident, nothing more." "But, Your Majesty," Lord Cresswell began, "are you questioning my judgment?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Golden eyes flashed with warning. "Of course not, Your Majesty. I merely thought—" "Then the matter is settled." The king turned back to Lila, and his expression softened again. "Are you hurt?" Lila blinked in confusion. "Hurt? Why would she be hurt?" "Sometimes when we're frightened we don't notice small injuries," he explained gently, as if reading her thoughts. "I want to make sure you're all right." No one had ever asked if she was all right. In 6 years of scrapes and cuts and cruel words, no one had ever cared about her well-being. "I'm fine," she managed, though her voice still shook. He nodded slowly, studying her face with an intensity that made her feel like he could see straight through to her soul. "Good," he said finally. "I would like you to personally attend to my chambers this evening. There are matters I wish to discuss." The hall erupted in shocked whispers. Lord Cresswell's mouth fell open like a landed fish. Even Cook dropped her serving spoon with a clatter. The Alpha King wanted to see her. Alone. Lila's mind reeled with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. What could he possibly want with her? What matters could the most powerful man in the kingdom wish to discuss with a broken servant? "Do you accept?" he asked, and there was something in his voice, something vulnerable beneath all that power that made her heart skip. She should say no. She should beg Lord Cresswell to send someone else, anyone else. She should remember that she was nothing, that powerful men only noticed nothing when they wanted to destroy it. But looking into those golden eyes, feeling that strange warmth still humming through her veins, she found herself nodding. "Yes, Your Majesty." Something that looked remarkably like relief flickered across his features. "Excellent. I'll expect you after the dinner concludes." The rest of the feast passed in a haze. Lila moved through her duties mechanically, her mind spinning with questions and fears and something else she didn't dare name. Hope. Dangerous, impossible hope. Lila stood outside the king's chamber door, her hand raised to knock, her courage failing with every breath. What was she doing here? The corridor was silent except for the rapid beating of her heart. Torches flickered along the stone walls, casting dancing shadows that seemed to mock her foolishness. She was a servant, a broken, wolfless nothing. She had no business being here. She should turn around, go back to the kitchens, pretend this had never happened. But before she could flee, the door opened. Alpha King Thaddeus stood in the doorway, no longer wearing his formal regalia. Instead, he wore simple dark clothing that somehow made him even more devastating. His golden eyes found hers immediately, and that strange warmth bloomed in her chest again. Lila. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. I was beginning to think you had changed your mind. No, Your Majesty, I wouldn't dare. Something flickered across his features. Please, come in and call me Thaddeus. In private, titles feel unnecessary. The chamber was nothing like she had expected. She had imagined cold grandeur, intimidating displays of wealth and power. Instead, she found a room warmed by firelight, filled with comfortable furniture and books. It felt lived in, safe. Sit, he said gently, gesturing to a chair near the fire. Please. Layla perched on the edge of the seat, every muscle tense with the need to run. He settled into the chair across from her, close enough that she could see the silver threads in his dark hair, far enough that she didn't feel trapped. You're afraid, he observed quietly. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes. Of me? Of everything. The words slipped out before she could stop them. She pressed her lips together, horrified by her honesty. But he only nodded, as if her fear made perfect sense. Tell me about your scars, he said softly. Lila's hands flew to her throat, where the worst of the marks disappeared beneath her dress. I don't understand. The scars on your hands, your arms, the one at your hairline. His voice was steady, but she caught the underlying tension. Who hurt you? No one had ever asked. In 6 years no one had cared enough to notice, let alone inquire about her pain. It doesn't matter, she whispered. It matters to me. The simple words hit her like a physical blow. Why? Why would her pain matter to the most powerful alpha in the kingdom? I've been here since I was 14, she heard herself saying. Lord Cresswell, he doesn't tolerate mistakes or questions or anything that reminds him that his servants are more than objects. Thaddeus's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting her speak. The scars are from various lessons, hot pokers for dropping dishes, knives for speaking out of turn, the one on my throat. She touched the mark reflexively. That was from asking for food when I was ill. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. When she looked up, Thaddeus's eyes were blazing with golden fire. He will answer for that, he said quietly. I promise you. No. The word came out sharp with panic. Please, you can't. He'll know I told you. He'll what? Thaddeus leaned forward, his voice deadly soft. Hurt you again? Touch what's mine? Mine. The word hung between them like a bridge she was too afraid to cross. I don't understand, she whispered. Thaddeus was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the firelight. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle again. Have you ever heard of the mate bond, Lila? She nodded slowly. It's what happens when 2 wolves find their perfect match, their other half. And what do you know of the signs? The pull, she said automatically, the warmth, the feeling that you've been searching your whole life for something and suddenly you've found it. Something in her chest fluttered as the words left her lips. The warmth, the pull, the impossible sense of recognition she had felt when their eyes met. No. But that's for wolves, she said quickly. Real wolves. I'm nothing. I'm broken. I can't even shift. Can't? Or won't? The question hit her like a slap. I don't have a wolf. I've tried. For years I've tried. Show me your hands, he said suddenly. Confused, Lila extended her scarred palms. Thaddeus reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed against hers. The effect was instant and overwhelming. Golden fire raced up her arms and through her entire body. The warmth she had felt before was nothing compared to this. This was like being struck by lightning and bathed in sunshine simultaneously. Her wolf, the wolf she had never felt, stirred deep in her chest like something awakening from a long sleep. She gasped and jerked back, but Thaddeus caught her hands gently, holding them steady. "Do you feel that?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. She could only nod, her eyes wide with wonder and terror. "That's the mate bond, Layla. You are my mate, my Luna, the other half of my soul." "That's impossible." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't. The golden thread connecting them hummed with truth. "I've been searching for you for 10 years, he continued, his thumbs brushing over her knuckles with infinite tenderness. "Following dreams and prophecies and whispers of a woman who would complete me. I never imagined I would find you here in this place." "But I'm nobody," she protested weakly. "A servant, wolfless." "You're everything." The conviction in his voice made her breath catch. "And you're not wolfless, Lila. Your wolf is there. I can sense her. She's simply been sleeping, waiting for the right moment to emerge." Lila stared at him, her world tilting on its axis. Everything she had believed about herself, everything she had accepted as truth, crumbled in the face of his certainty. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would the moon goddess choose someone like me for someone like you?" Thaddeus smiled then, and it transformed his entire face. Gone was the intimidating Alpha King. In his place sat a man who looked at her like she was the most precious thing in existence. "Perhaps because you understand suffering, because you know what it means to be broken and still find the strength to keep going, because your heart is pure in a way that power and privilege can never create." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Or perhaps because you're exactly what I need. Someone who sees past the crown to the man beneath. Someone who won't love me for what I can give them, but for who I am." "I don't know how to be what you need," she admitted, tears gathering in her eyes. "You don't have to be anything other than yourself." His hands tightened around hers. "But I need to know, when the inspection ends, when I return to the capital, will you come with me?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibility and terror. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," he admitted, and the vulnerability in his voice undid her. "I'm scared of how much I already care about you. I'm scared of how lost I'll be if you say no. But mostly, I'm scared of leaving you in this place for even one more day." Lila looked into his golden eyes and saw her future reflected there. A future where she mattered, where she was cherished, where she was enough. It was terrifying. It was impossible. It was everything she had never dared to dream. "Ask me again tomorrow," she whispered, "after I've had time to think." Thaddeus nodded slowly, though disappointment flickered across his features. "I'll wait," he said simply. "However long you need, I'll wait." As she rose to leave, he caught her hand one more time. "Lila? Yes? You're not broken, you're not worthless, and you're certainly not nothing." His eyes burned with fierce conviction. "You're mine, and I protect what's mine." The golden thread between them pulsed with warmth as she fled into the night, her heart racing with terrifying, wonderful hope. Lila barely slept that night. She lay on her thin straw mattress in the servants' quarters, staring at the ceiling while her mind replayed every word, every touch, every impossible moment. "You're mine." The words echoed through her thoughts like a prayer and a promise. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the golden fire of his touch racing through her veins. The mate bond, real and undeniable and utterly terrifying. She rose before dawn, desperate for the familiar routine of kitchen work to ground her spinning thoughts. But even scrubbing pots couldn't silence the voice in her head that whispered dangerous possibilities. What if he was right? What if she wasn't broken? What if she was enough? "You look like death warmed over," Cook observed, studying Lila's pale face. "Rough night with His Majesty?" The leer in her voice made Lila's stomach turn. Nothing happened. Course not. What would a man like that want with damaged goods? The cruel words should have hurt. A day ago they would have. But something had shifted in the space between heartbeats. When Lila looked at her reflection in the wash basin, she didn't see worthless any more. She saw the woman the Alpha King had called precious. The morning passed in a blur of preparation for the king's departure. He was leaving after the noon meal, returning to important matters of state, back to his real life, where he belonged, away from her. The thought sent an unexpected pang through her chest. How had she become so attached to someone she had known for less than a day? She was arranging fresh flowers in the great hall when a shadow fell across her work. "Working hard as always, little wolf." Lila's blood turned to ice. She knew that voice, smooth and cultured and hiding a core of pure malice. Lord Cresswell. She kept her eyes down, continuing to arrange the blooms with hands that suddenly trembled. "My lord." "His Majesty speaks very highly of you." There was something in his tone that made her skin crawl. "Quite taken with your service." "I did my duties as instructed, my lord." "Indeed." He moved closer, close enough that she could smell the wine on his breath despite the early hour. "Tell me, what did you discuss during your private audience?" Lila's heart hammered against her ribs. This was dangerous ground. One wrong word could destroy everything. "His Majesty asked about the manner, my lord, the quality of service, nothing more." "Nothing more." Cresswell's hand shot out, gripping her chin and forcing her to look at him. His pale eyes glittered with suspicion. "You're lying." "I'm not. Do you think I'm a fool?" His fingers tightened painfully. "I saw how he looked at you, how he protected you from proper punishment." Panic fluttered in her throat. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't you?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Perhaps I should remind you of your place. A few hours in the punishment cell might refresh your memory about who you really serve." "Release her." The voice cut through the air like a blade. Lord Cresswell spun around, his face flushing red as Thaddeus stepped into the hall. The Alpha King looked magnificent and terrible, power radiating from him in waves that made the air itself tremble. His golden eyes were fixed on Cresswell's hand, still gripping Lila's face. "Your Majesty!" Cresswell stammered, releasing her so quickly she stumbled. "I was merely correcting a servant's—" "I said release her." Thaddeus's voice was deadly quiet. "Step away, now." Cresswell obeyed, backing up several paces with his hands raised. But Lila could see the rage burning in his eyes, the promise of retribution once the king was gone. "Are you hurt?" Thaddeus asked, his attention shifting to her. The contrast between the fury he had shown Cresswell and the gentleness in his voice when he spoke to her was staggering. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her face throbbed where Cresswell's fingers had dug in. Thaddeus stepped closer, his hand hovering near her cheek but not quite touching. "May I?" She nodded, and his fingers brushed feather light over the tender skin. Even that gentle touch sent warmth spiraling through her. "This ends now," he said, his eyes never leaving her face. "You will not be touched again. Not by him, not by anyone. Do you understand?" "Your Majesty," Cresswell interjected, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "You cannot simply—" "Cannot what?" Thaddeus turned, and the look in his eyes could have melted steel. "Protect what belongs to me, because that's what she is, Cresswell, mine." The declaration rang through the hall like a battle cry. Lila's breath caught as the golden thread between them pulsed with fierce possessiveness. "You're leaving," Cresswell said carefully. "Surely you don't intend—" "I intend exactly what I said." Thaddeus's voice was granite hard with finality. "She comes with me, today." The words hit Lila like lightning. He wasn't asking any more. He was claiming her. "But Your Majesty," Cresswell protested, "she's bound to my service. Contracted." "Show me the contract." The demand was simple, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Cresswell's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The papers are... It's merely a standard." "There is no contract," Thaddeus said softly. "Is there, Cresswell? Because you don't buy servants. You collect broken souls and convince them they have nowhere else to go." Lila stared at him in shock. No contract? But she had always assumed... "That's not... She came here willingly. At 14, starving and desperate." Thaddeus's voice was ice and fire. "But she's not 14 anymore, and she's not desperate. She's under my protection now." He turned back to Lila, his expression softening again. "The choice is yours," he said quietly. "Always yours. But if you want to leave this place, if you want to discover who you really are, come with me." Lila looked around the great hall that had been her prison for 6 years, at Lord Cresswell, whose face promised pain and retribution, at the servants who had never shown her kindness. Then she looked at Thaddeus, at the man who saw worth in her when she saw none in herself, who touched her like she was precious, who called her his. The decision had been made the moment his hand touched hers. Everything else was just fear trying to convince her she didn't deserve happiness. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger. "Yes, I'll come with you." Something blazed in Thaddeus's eyes. Relief and triumph and fierce joy all mixed together. "Go pack whatever you wish to bring," he told her gently. "We leave within the hour." As she turned to go, Lord Cresswell's voice stopped her cold. "This won't end well, little wolf. Men like him use women like you and throw you away when they tire of the novelty. You'll come crawling back, and when you do—" He smiled, all teeth and cruelty. "I'll be waiting." The words hit their target, sending doubts spiralling through her chest. What if he was right? What if this was all just a game to the king? But then Thaddeus was there, stepping between her and Cresswell like a living shield. "If I hear that you have so much as spoken her name again," he said, his voice so quiet it was almost a whisper, "I will return, and I will show you exactly what happens to men who threaten what belongs to the Alpha King." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Lord Cresswell went pale, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. "Do I make myself clear?" Thaddeus asked. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Good." He turned back to Lila, his expression gentle again. "Go, pack. Don't keep me waiting too long." As she hurried toward the servants' quarters, Lila heard Lord Cresswell's voice one last time, low and venomous. "You think you know what she is? You think you understand what you're taking? You have no idea what you've unleashed." Lila paused, confusion flickering through her. What did he mean? But Thaddeus's reply drove all other thoughts from her mind. "I know exactly what she is," he said softly. "She's mine, and she's perfect." The golden thread in her chest sang with truth as Lila ran to gather her few possessions. For the first time in 6 years, she was going home. She was going to the place where she belonged. Lila clutched her single bundle of belongings as they prepared to depart. Everything she owned fit into a cloth bag smaller than a loaf of bread. 6 years of life reduced to a handful of threadbare clothes and one precious thing, her mother's silver pendant, the only link to the family who had abandoned her. The royal carriage waited in the courtyard, magnificent and intimidating. She had never ridden in anything grander than a farmer's cart. "Are you ready?" Thaddeus asked gently, appearing beside her like a guardian angel in dark leathers. "I think so," she whispered, though her heart hammered with equal parts terror and excitement. He helped her into the carriage with the same careful reverence he might show a queen. As they pulled away from Ravenshollow Manor, Lila pressed her face to the window, watching the only home she had known disappear into the distance. No regrets? Thaddeus asked, studying her profile. She thought about that, about Lord Cresswell's cruelty and Cook's constant derision, about sleeping on straw and working until her hands bled, about believing she was nothing. None, she said firmly, and meant it. They had been travelling for perhaps an hour when the attack came. The first sign of danger was the unnatural silence. The forest around them went quiet. No birdsong, no rustling leaves, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Thaddeus went rigid, his head snapping up with predatory alertness. "What is it?" Lila asked, but she already knew. Every instinct she had developed over years of surviving told her something was wrong. "Rogues," he said grimly, leaning toward the window. "Many of them." The carriage lurched to a sudden stop. Shouts erupted from outside, the King's guards engaging unknown enemies. The clash of steel on steel rang through the air. "Stay down," Thaddeus commanded, his voice sharp with authority. "Whatever happens, don't leave this carriage." He started to rise, but Lila's hand shot out, gripping his arm. "Don't go out there, please." Something in her voice made him pause. Fear, yes, but something else. Something that felt almost like foresight. "I have to," he said gently, covering her hand with his. "It's what I'm trained for." "They're not here for you," she whispered, the certainty hitting her like a physical blow. "They're here for me." His eyes narrowed. "What makes you say that?" Before she could answer, the carriage door was ripped from its hinges. A massive rogue wolf in human form stood in the opening, his scarred face twisted with savage pleasure. Behind him, Lila could see at least a dozen others, all shifted, all snarling with bloodlust. "Well, well," the rogue leader growled, "if it isn't the wolfless little princess." "Princess? Run, Lila," Thaddeus said quietly, his body coiled like a spring ready to strike. Now. But there was nowhere to run. Rogues surrounded the carriage on all sides. The King's guards lay scattered and still, not dead but unconscious. Someone had used sleeping herbs or magic to take them down without killing. This was planned, coordinated, and they wanted her alive. "You're not going anywhere, little wolf," the leader sneered. "Not when you're worth so much to the right people." "She's under my protection," Thaddeus snarled, moving to shield her with his body. "Your protection?" The rogue laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "King or not, you're outnumbered 20-1. Smart money says you walk away and let us take what we came for." "Never." The word was barely human, more growl than speech. Power rolled off Thaddeus in waves that made the air itself vibrate. "Your choice," the rogue shrugged. "Boys, take the girl. Kill the king if he interferes." They moved as one, a coordinated attack from multiple directions. Thaddeus shifted instantly, his magnificent black wolf erupting in the space between Lila and her attackers. He was massive, easily twice the size of any rogue, with golden eyes that blazed like the sun. But even he couldn't fight 20 rogues alone. Lila watched in horror as they overwhelmed him through sheer numbers. For every rogue he brought down, 2 more took its place. His howls of rage and pain tore through her chest like physical wounds. They were going to kill him because of her. A small child's cry pierced the chaos. One of the carriage attendants had brought her young son on the journey. The boy cowered behind an overturned trunk as a rogue stalked toward him, claws extended. Something snapped inside Lila. All her life she had been the victim, the broken thing that needed saving, the worthless servant who couldn't even defend herself. No more. The rage that filled her was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It started as a warm glow in her chest and exploded outward until it consumed every cell in her body. For the first time in her 20 years of life, Lila felt her wolf stir. But this wasn't the tentative awakening she had always imagined. This was a roaring emergence that shook her to her very bones. Her vision blurred. Her bones elongated and reformed. Power flooded her system like liquid fire. When the transformation completed, silence fell over the battlefield like a blanket. Lila looked down at herself and gasped. She wasn't just any wolf. Her coat was pure white, so brilliant it seemed to glow with its own inner light. Silver markings spiraled across her fur in patterns that looked almost like ancient runes. She was larger than any female wolf should be, nearly matching Thaddeus in size, but it was her eyes that made everyone freeze. They blazed silver white, like stars captured in mortal form. The rogue leader took an involuntary step backward. "Impossible," he breathed. "The white wolf is just a legend." Lila's wolf threw back her head and howled. The sound that emerged was nothing like a normal wolf's call. It resonated with power that seemed to come from the earth itself, carrying impossible distances and calling to something primal in every supernatural creature within miles. She was the moon goddess's chosen, the prophesied Luna, the white wolf of legend, and she was done being afraid. She moved like liquid lightning, faster than thought, faster than fear. The rogues barely had time to react before she was among them. The wolf who had threatened the child died first. His neck snapped before he could even cry out. The others tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Lila's wolf was everywhere at once, a white blur of vengeance and protective fury. Thaddeus's black wolf joined her, moving in perfect synchronization, as if they had been fighting together for years instead of minutes. They were magnificent together, devastating, unstoppable. When the last rogue fell, Lila shifted back to human form, swaying on her feet as exhaustion crashed over her. Thaddeus was beside her instantly, catching her before she could fall. "How?" she gasped, staring at her hands as if she had never seen them before. "How is this possible?" "You're her," he said, his voice filled with wonder and something that looked remarkably like awe. "You're the white wolf from the prophecies, the Luna who will either save the kingdom or see it fall." Lila looked around at the carnage, at the unconscious guards beginning to stir, at the child she had saved. "What does that mean?" she whispered. Thaddeus cupped her face in his hands, his golden eyes blazing with fierce pride and possessive love. "It means, my beautiful mate," he said softly, "that our real story is just beginning." The golden thread between them pulsed with power and promise as Lila realized her life had just changed forever. She wasn't broken. She wasn't worthless. She was legendary. The capital city sprawled before them like a jewel against the mountainside, its spires and towers gleaming in the afternoon sun. Lila pressed her face to the carriage window, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of it all. She had never seen so many people in one place, so many buildings, so much everything. "Second thoughts?" Thaddeus asked gently, though she could hear the tension beneath his casual tone. "Terrified thoughts," she admitted. "This is your world. I don't know how to exist in it." "You don't have to change," he said firmly, taking her hand. "You just have to be yourself." If only it were that simple. Word of their arrival had preceded them. As their carriage rolled through the city gates, crowds lined the streets. Some cheered, throwing flowers and calling out blessings. Others stared in silent curiosity at the woman who had captured their Alpha King's heart. But it was the whispers that made Lila's stomach clench with anxiety. Is that really her? The white wolf? She looks so ordinary. A servant? How can a servant be Luna? Thaddeus's jaw tightened with each disparaging comment, but Lila squeezed his hand. "They're not wrong," she said quietly. "I am ordinary. I was a servant." "You were never ordinary," he replied fiercely, "and anyone who can't see that will learn." The royal palace was beyond anything Lila had ever imagined. Marble columns stretched toward painted ceilings that depicted the history of the wolf kingdoms. Tapestries worth more than entire villages hung from gilded walls. Everything spoke of power and wealth and a legacy stretching back centuries. Everything spoke of how little she belonged here. "Your Majesty." A stern-faced woman in elegant robes approached them in the main hall. The council is assembled and waiting. Thaddeus nodded curtly. Lady Helena, may I present my mate, Lila? The woman's eyes swept over Lila with cool assessment, taking in her simple travel dress and nervous posture. Your Majesty, Lady Helena said carefully, perhaps the young woman would be more comfortable resting while you address the council's concerns? Translation: perhaps the servant should wait outside while the adults talked. My mate will be joining us, Thaddeus said, his tone brooking no argument. She is Luna of this kingdom, whether the ceremony has taken place or not. Lady Helena's lips thinned, but she bowed her head in acknowledgement. The council chamber was a vast circular room with a domed ceiling painted with constellations. 12 men and women sat around a crescent-shaped table, their faces ranging from curious to openly hostile. Your Majesty, the eldest man spoke, his voice formal and cold. Lord Commander Aldrich, at your service, we understand congratulations are in order on finding your destined mate. Thank you, Aldrich. Though we confess to some confusion about the circumstances. Lila felt heat rise in her cheeks. Here it came. The reports we've received speak of a servant girl who somehow manifested unprecedented power during a rogue attack. Such claims seem extraordinary. The reports are accurate, Thaddeus replied evenly. Your Majesty, a sharp-faced woman interjected. Surely you understand our concerns. The Luna will stand beside you in ruling this kingdom. Her bloodline, her training, her political connections, all of these matter. Her worth matters, Thaddeus said quietly, and I am the only judge of that. But the prophecies, another council member began. What about them? They speak of a white wolf who will either save the kingdom or see it fall. How do we know which path this person will choose? Lila's hands clenched in her lap. Person, not even worthy of a name. Perhaps, Lord Commander Aldrich said carefully, a trial period would be appropriate, time for proper training and evaluation before any permanent commitments are made. The golden thread in Lila's chest pulled tight with hurt and anger. They were discussing her future as if she weren't sitting right there. There will be no trial period, Thaddeus said, his voice gaining a dangerous edge. She is my mate, my Luna. That is not negotiable. Your Majesty, the sharp-faced woman pressed. What if the power she displayed was a fluke? What if she cannot control it? An unstable Luna could... Enough! Thaddeus rose from his chair, power radiating from him in waves. You question her worth, you doubt her stability, then allow me to share what I know. He moved to stand behind Lila's chair, his hands resting protectively on her shoulders. This woman survived 6 years of abuse and cruelty that would have broken lesser spirits. She protected a child at the cost of revealing power she didn't understand. She faced down 20 rogues without hesitation when innocent lives were at stake. His voice grew stronger with each word. She has more courage in her smallest finger than most of you have shown in a lifetime of comfortable politics. She has the heart of a true Luna, and I will hear no more questions about her worthiness. Silence fell over the chamber like snow. However, Thaddeus continued, his tone softening slightly, if the council requires proof of our bond's legitimacy, we will provide it. Lord Commander Aldrich leaned forward. What do you propose? The traditional mating ceremony, under the full moon, before witnesses. Let any who doubt see the truth of what we are to each other. Lila's breath caught. The mating ceremony was sacred, permanent, binding their souls together for eternity. There would be no going back after that. And if the ceremony fails? The sharp-faced woman asked. If the moon goddess does not bless the union? Then you may name me a fool and choose your own Luna, Thaddeus replied, but it will not fail. The certainty in his voice made Lila's chest tight with emotion. How could he be so sure? How could he stake his entire reign on someone like her? Very well, Aldrich said slowly. The full moon rises in 3 days. That should be sufficient time to prepare. As the council dispersed, Lila remained seated, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just been decided. "Lila!" Thaddeus knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I need you to know I didn't agree to this to prove anything to them. I agreed because I want the whole world to know you're mine." "What if they're right?" she whispered. "What if I can't control the power? What if I fail?" "Then we fail together." His golden eyes burned with fierce conviction. "But you won't fail, my love. You're stronger than you know." That evening he took her to the palace's sacred grove, a place where generations of royal ceremonies had taken place. Ancient trees formed a natural cathedral around a clearing of white stone, and at its centre stood an altar carved with runes of binding and blessing. "Every Luna in my family line has stood here," Thaddeus said softly, his arm around her waist. "My mother, my grandmother, queens stretching back 1,000 years." "And now me," Lila said, still unable to believe it. "And now you." He turned her to face him, his hands framing her face. "In 3 days, under the full moon, I will claim you before the moon goddess herself. Are you ready for that?" Lila looked into his golden eyes and saw her future reflected there. Not just love, but partnership. Not just protection, but equality. Not just acceptance, but belonging. "Yes," she whispered, "I'm ready." He kissed her then, soft and reverent and full of promise. The golden thread between them hummed with anticipation and love and the unshakable certainty that they were exactly where they belonged, together. 3 days, he murmured against her lips. 3 days, she agreed, her heart full of terrifying, wonderful hope. In 3 days she would no longer be Lila the servant, Lila the broken, Lila the nothing. She would be Luna. She would be his, forever. 6 months had passed since the mating ceremony that changed everything. Lila stood on the palace balcony overlooking the kingdom's heart, watching the morning market bustle to life below. Merchants called their wares, children chased each other through the square, and wolves in both forms moved together in harmony that still amazed her. This was her kingdom now. These were her people. The thought no longer filled her with terror. My Luna! A soft voice interrupted her reverie. Sarah, her lady-in-waiting, approached with the morning reports. "The council awaits your pleasure." Lila smiled at the young woman who had become a dear friend. "Tell them I'll be there shortly. And Sarah? It's just Lila when we're alone." "Yes, my Lila." Sarah grinned and hurried away. The months had been a whirlwind of learning and growing. Royal protocols, kingdom finances, diplomatic relations with neighbouring territories. But underneath it all, Lila had discovered something that surprised everyone, including herself. She was good at this. Her years as a servant had taught her to listen, to notice details others missed, to understand what people needed before they voiced it. The nobles who had once questioned her common origins now sought her counsel. The common people who had viewed her with suspicion now brought their concerns directly to her. She was their Luna, not because of bloodline or political connections, but because she had earned their trust. "You look thoughtful." Strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind, and Lila melted back against Thaddeus's chest. "Just marvelling at how much has changed," she said, covering his hands with hers. "Any regrets?" "Only one." She turned in his arms, smiling up at his beloved face. "I regret waiting so long to believe I deserved this." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of the love that had only grown stronger with each passing day. They were interrupted by the sound of running footsteps. A young guard burst onto the balcony, his face flushed with urgency. "Your Majesties, forgive the intrusion, but we have a situation. Lord Cresswell has been spotted leading a massive force toward the capital. Intelligence estimates over 300 rogues, maybe more." Lila's blood went cold. She had hoped they had seen the last of her former tormentor. "How long do we have?" Thaddeus asked, immediately shifting into his role as Alpha King. They'll reach the outer defences by sunset, Your Majesty. Lila felt the familiar stir of her wolf, no longer frightening but welcome. In the months since her first transformation, she had learned to work with her power rather than fear it. She was stronger now, more controlled, but most importantly, she understood what she was fighting for. "Gather the council," she said, her voice carrying the authority that had taken months to develop. "Alert the city guard and send word to the allied packs. We may need reinforcements." The guard bowed and ran to carry out her orders. Thaddeus looked at her with something that might have been surprise. "What?" she asked. "6 months ago you would have hidden behind me and let me handle the threat," he observed. "Now you're giving orders like you were born to it." "Maybe I was," she said simply. "Maybe this is who I was always meant to be." The War Council convened within the hour. Maps spread across the great table, showing Cresswell's approach and the kingdom's defensive positions. "He's not just bringing rogues," Lord Commander Aldrich reported grimly. "Our spies indicate he's rallied several minor lords who still question Your Majesty's legitimacy. He's calling it a liberation." "Liberation from what?" Lila asked. "From the rule of a false Luna," Aldrich replied reluctantly. "He claims you're not the true White Wolf, that your power is stolen or cursed." Lila felt Thaddeus tense beside her, but she remained calm. Months of dealing with politics had taught her that panic was a luxury leaders couldn't afford. "And what do our people believe?" she asked. "They believe in you, Your Majesty," Lady Helena said firmly. The same woman who had once questioned Lila's worthiness now defended her without reservation. "The prosperity of the past 6 months speaks for itself." It was true. Under their joint rule, trade had flourished, disputes between packs had been resolved peacefully, and the kingdom had found a stability it hadn't known in decades. "Then we fight," Lila said simply, "not just to defend our throne, but to protect the peace we've built." "My Luna," Aldrich said carefully, "perhaps you should remain in the palace while His Majesty leads the defence." "No." Lila's wolf stirred, power rippling through her voice. "This ends today. Cresswell started this war the moment he decided I was his to torment. I won't hide while others fight my battles." "Lila," Thaddeus said quietly, "he's not wrong about the danger. Cresswell won't be trying to capture you alive this time." "Good," she replied, meeting his golden eyes steadily. "I'm not planning to be captured." The battle came at sunset, just as predicted. Lila stood on the palace walls in her wolf form, her white coat gleaming like starlight in the fading light. Below, Cresswell's force spread across the valley like a dark stain. But they weren't the only ones who had come to fight. Allied packs had answered their call, hundreds of loyal wolves who had seen what Lila and Thaddeus had accomplished together. Citizens of the capital had taken up arms to defend their home. Even former skeptics among the nobility stood ready to fight. This was what she had never understood as a frightened servant. Leadership wasn't about being perfect or having the right bloodline. It was about inspiring others to be their best selves. "Together?" Thaddeus asked, his massive black wolf settling beside her. "Always," she replied. They leaped from the walls in perfect synchronization, their wolves moving as one toward the coming storm. The battle was fierce, but not long. Cresswell had numbers, but they had something more powerful: unity. Their forces fought not as individual wolves, but as a pack, protecting each other, moving with shared purpose. And at the centre of it all, the Alpha King and his white wolf Luna fought side by side, their bond giving them strength beyond anything either could achieve alone. When Cresswell finally faced them directly, his scarred face twisted with rage and madness, Lila felt only pity. "You could have been great," she told him as they circled each other. "You had power, resources, opportunity, but you chose cruelty instead of kindness." "Spare me your righteous speeches," he snarled. "You're still the same worthless girl I should have killed years ago." "You're right," she said softly. "I am the same girl, the one who survived everything you did to her, the one who chose to become something better instead of something bitter. She could have killed him quickly. Her power was far beyond his now. Instead, she chose mercy. She defeated him, but she let him live, banished him to the borderlands with the warning that mercy would only be offered once. "Why?" Thaddeus asked later as they stood among their celebrating people. "Because someone once showed me that worth isn't proven by causing pain," she said, touching his face tenderly. "You taught me that strength means protecting the weak, not destroying them." Years later, when their twin pups played at their feet during council meetings, Lila would sometimes remember the scared servant girl who had believed she was nothing. That girl had been wrong about many things, but she had been right about one. She had been searching her whole life for home. She had just needed to learn that home wasn't a place. It was being seen, being valued, being loved exactly as she was. It was belonging to someone who looked at her like she hung the stars while knowing she was strong enough to shine on her own. Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video if you enjoyed Lila's journey from servant to Luna, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from around the world. Your support means everything, and I love hearing from our amazing community. Don't forget to subscribe for more epic alpha romance stories, and until next time, remember that you are worthy of a love that sees your true value.